Welcome to tonight's terrifying adventure, where we dive into one of the most haunted places in America, the infamous Bell Witch Cave. Known for its terrifying history and paranormal activity, the Bell Witch is a legend that still haunts the woods of Tennessee. In today's video, we'll explore the curse of the Bell Witch and take you inside the eerie cave, where visitors have experienced strange sounds, supernatural forces, and even ghostly apparitions. What happened to us when we ventured into this cursed location? Well, let's just say, you don't want to miss this. Grab your flashlight and prepare for a chilling journey into American horror history. You won't believe what we discovered. The Curse of the Bell Witch Cave. It was supposed to be just another weekend getaway. My best friend John and I had planned a road trip through Tennessee, hitting all the famous tourist spots. We were thrill seekers, fascinated by the eerie side of American history. And there was no better place to start than the Bell Witch Cave. For those unfamiliar with the story, the Bell Witch legend is one of the most chilling in the United States, centered around the Bell family in the early 19th century. The haunting began when a malevolent spirit known as the Bell Witch tormented the family, eventually leading to the death of John Bell, the father. The witch's presence was said to be so powerful that it could manipulate objects, make disturbing noises, and even physically harm people. John had always been a skeptic, convinced that these stories were exaggerated, if not outright fabricated. But I had a feeling that we might encounter something we couldn't explain. We arrived at the Bell Witch Cave, located deep in the woods near Adams, Tennessee. The site was famous for being the epicenter of the haunting, and it drew tourists from all over the country. The air felt heavier here, as if the very ground was charged with something unseen. The trees around the cave were twisted, their gnarled branches casting eerie shadows even in the late afternoon light. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" John asked, glancing around nervously. "It feels like something's watching us." "Relax," I said, my voice laced with a nervous laugh. "It's just an old legend. People come here all the time." But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. We weren't alone. We made our way down a narrow, winding path that led to the cave's entrance, a large, jagged opening surrounded by thick brush. The cave itself looked ancient, its dark mouth swallowing the light from the sun. It felt like a place where secrets had been buried for centuries. The tour guide, a local with a deep Southern accent, greeted us. He looked older, worn out, like someone who had seen too many strange things. "You folks sure you want to go in there? The Bell Witch doesn't take kindly to visitors." John laughed, but I noticed the guide wasn't joking. His eyes were serious and a chill ran down my spine. Something about him felt wrong. We entered the cave with a group of other tourists, our flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The guide explained the history of the hauntings, recounting the strange noises, moving objects, and poltergeist-like activities that had plagued the Bell family. As we ventured deeper into the cave, I began to feel a strange sensation in my chest. The air grew cooler, and I noticed that the further we walked, the more the temperature dropped. My breath became visible in front of me, despite it being a warm day outside. John and I exchanged nervous glances. "I don't remember it being this cold," I whispered. "Maybe it's just the cave," John muttered. But I could hear the unease in his voice. The group pressed forward, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The silence was unsettling, so thick you could almost hear your heart pounding in your chest. Then, It happened. At first, it was a faint whisper, barely audible over the sound of our footsteps. "Help! Help me!" I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. John turned to me, his face pale. "Did you hear that?" Before I could respond, the voice came again, clearer this time. "Help me. I'm trapped." It sounded like it was coming from the very walls of the cave. My breath quickened, and I could feel my legs starting to tremble. "Is anyone else hearing that?" I asked, my voice tight with fear. The group stood in stunned silence. The guide looked uneasy, his hand trembling slightly as he held his flashlight. "We need to move. Now!" But it was too late. The cave seemed to close in on us. The walls narrowed, and the air grew thick with an unseen presence. Suddenly, the temperature dropped even further. My fingers were numb from the cold, and I could see my breath hanging in the air. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. A figure standing just beyond the reach of my flashlight beam. It was tall, its form hunched and shadowy, with glowing eyes that pierced through the darkness. The air felt suffocating, like the very cave was alive and trying to swallow us whole. The whispering grew louder. "You shouldn't have come here. She'll never let you leave." Before I could react, the ground beneath us shook violently. The cave trembled like it was about to collapse, and I heard a terrible screeching sound, as though the earth itself was being torn apart. John screamed, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the exit. But as we ran, the figure seemed to follow us, its glowing eyes always just beyond our reach. We made it to the mouth of the cave, gasping for breath, our hearts pounding in our chests. But when we looked back, the figure was gone. The cave stood silent and still, like nothing had happened. We didn't speak much on the drive back to our motel. Both of us were shaken, our nerves frayed. The feeling of being watched never left us, and even though we tried to rationalize it, we knew deep down that something in that cave was real. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that whisper in my head. "You shouldn't have come here. She'll never let you leave." I didn't know if it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but I swear I saw those glowing eyes watching me from the window, as if the Bell Witch had followed us, waiting for the right moment to claim us. We never returned to the Bell Witch cave, but the feeling never left us. And I've heard that people who visit that place often have strange dreams or feel a cold presence following them afterward. It's almost as if the witch never truly lets go. Second story, The Haunting of Blackwood Forest. It was supposed to be an adventure, a chance for me and my best friend Rachel to escape the monotony of everyday life and get some fresh air in the wild. We had both just graduated from college, and after months of studying, assignments, and sleepless nights, we felt like we deserved a break. So we decided to go on a weekend trip to Blackwood Forest, a secluded patch of woods on the outskirts of New York. The stories we'd heard about the place had always intrigued us. There were rumors that it was haunted, filled with mysterious happenings that locals whispered about. But honestly, we thought it was all just exaggeration. Nothing more than spooky tales passed down through generations. I didn't know it then, but that decision would be the start of something far beyond our understanding. We arrived at Blackwood Forest around noon, the sunlight casting long shadows through the trees. It looked like a typical forest, lush, green, and quiet, just the kind of place where you could get lost in nature. But as we ventured deeper, I began to notice the strange stillness in the air. It wasn't just quiet. It was unnervingly silent. Even the usual sounds of birds and small animals seemed absent. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel asked, her voice tense as she looked around nervously. "Yeah, why?" I replied, trying to mask the unease creeping up my spine. "I don't know. This place feels off," she said, her eyes darting between the trees. I chuckled, trying to reassure her. "Come on, it's just a forest. There's nothing to be afraid of." But even as the words left my mouth, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the shadows. We continued on the trail, passing ancient oaks that looked centuries old. The air grew thicker, cooler, and the further we walked, the more isolated we felt. Rachel was lagging behind now, her pace slow and hesitant. I could feel the tension in the air, but I didn't want to admit that I was beginning to feel it too. Suddenly, Rachel stopped. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I frowned. "Hear what?" There was a low, guttural noise, almost like a sigh, but it came from somewhere deep within the forest. It wasn't the sound of an animal or the wind. It was something human. "Let's just keep going," I said, trying to sound confident. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. We pressed forward, but the air seemed heavier with every step, the woods growing darker and more oppressive. I glanced at my watch. It wasn't even late afternoon yet, but it already felt like dusk. And then we saw it. We came across an old, abandoned cabin nestled in a clearing. The wooden structure was weathered, its windows dark and broken. The door hung off its hinges, as though it had been left in a hurry. Rachel looked at it uneasily. "This doesn't look like a place we should be exploring." But something about the cabin drew me in. Maybe it was the curiosity, or maybe it was the fact that we had no other shelter for miles. "Let's check it out," I suggested. As soon as we stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop. The air was thick with dust, and the place smelled like it hadn't been touched in decades. Old furniture was scattered around, some of it overturned. The walls were covered in faded, peeling wallpaper, and there was a strange feeling of abandonment. I walked over to the far wall, where an old mirror hung crookedly. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, but when I wiped it away, I saw something in the reflection that made my blood run cold. A shadow, a figure, standing right behind me. But when I turned around, there was no one there. My heart raced. "Rachel, did you—" I began. But when I looked at her, her face was pale, her eyes wide in terror. "I saw it too," she whispered. "Something is here with us." I didn't know what to say. I felt it then, the presence in the room. It wasn't just the eerie silence or the strange atmosphere. It was something watching us, something alive, but not human. And then the sounds started. First, it was a faint scraping noise, like nails against wood. Then came the low whispering, as though voices were rising from the very foundation of the cabin. Rachel was shaking now, her eyes darting around as if trying to find the source of the noise. The air grew heavier, almost suffocating, and I could feel a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. "Get out! Get out!" Rachel screamed, suddenly bolting for the door. I followed her, but as we reached the threshold, something slammed against the door from the inside, preventing us from leaving. We both screamed, trying to push the door open, but it wouldn't budge. That's when I saw it. In the corner of the cabin, just past the broken furniture, was a dark shape. A figure, tall and skeletal, its eyes glowing faintly. It moved slowly, its movements jerky and unnatural, as though it didn't quite belong in this world. I could feel my legs turning to jelly as panic set in. "Rachel, we need to get out now!" With one final push, the door creaked open and we stumbled out into the cold, dark woods. But it wasn't over. The thing followed us, its eerie whispering growing louder. Every tree seemed to blur as we ran, the shadows closing in on us, swallowing the light from the moon. We ran for what felt like hours, neither of us daring to look back. Finally, we stumbled out of the woods and into a clearing, gasping for breath. The woods had fallen silent again, but something felt wrong. The ground beneath us seemed to tremble as though the forest was alive. I looked around, trying to orient myself, but everything looked unfamiliar. Suddenly, there was a voice. Not from the thing chasing us, but from somewhere nearby. "You shouldn't have come here." I turned around to see a man standing a few feet away. He was tall, his face gaunt and pale, dressed in tattered clothes. His eyes were sunken, but they gleamed with an unsettling intensity. He didn't seem like a local, and his presence only made my heart race faster. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "This forest," he said slowly. "It claims those who dare disturb it. The spirits that wander here, they're never truly gone. They follow, they watch, they wait." Before I could react, he turned and disappeared into the woods, leaving us alone once again. But the fear didn't fade. We knew that something in those woods had been watching us, waiting for us to make the wrong move. By the time we finally made it back to the car, both of us were shaking, our clothes torn, our minds shattered by what we had experienced. As we drove away, the darkness of Blackwood Forest fading behind us, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't truly escaped. That whatever had followed us, whatever had watched us from the shadows, was still out there, waiting for the next unsuspecting victim. And as the lights of the city appeared in the distance, I heard a faint whisper in my ear. "You shouldn't have come here." If you enjoyed these spine-chilling stories and want more terrifying tales from the world of the supernatural, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for more real ghost stories, haunted places, and paranormal encounters that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update from us, because the next story might just be the one you'll never forget. Thanks for watching, and remember, the supernatural is always closer than you think. Stay with us for more chilling videos. See you in the next one.